guys. Welcome to the Matt and Kendall Hagee podcast. You know, today Kendall and I are going to be covering a topic that is easier said than done, and that topic is forgiveness. Recently, we had a conversation with a good friend of ours, Pastor Jentezen Franklin from Free Chapel in Gainesville, Georgia, and he has a powerful book that shares personal testimony of a season of difficult challenges that he faced in his family and in his life. And that book is titled Love Like You've Never Been Hurt. This conversation is a very transparent one. It's a very heartfelt time in Jentezen's life in which he learned how to do something that I think benefits each and every one of us. Yes. And I assure you, no matter who you are, no matter what you're walking through, this is something you're going to want to hear. Take a listen as Jentezen shares on this topic of forgiveness from the perspective, love like you've never been hurt. Pastor Jentezen Franklin. Jentezen, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be with you guys.
You've released a book that it really is gripping. And it's gripping for me because, one, not only do I agree with the information that's in it and the power that you've really allowed people to receive from your life experience, but two, I know you. And when I'm reading these stories, I see the transparency that you've shared with in your book, Love Like You've Never Been Hurt Before. What was it that made you feel like that was a message that needed to be shared?
Well, I think the similarity in our connection is family. When we wrote, and really, Sharice, my wife, we wrote the book together. We'd never wrote a book together.
I love that.
And we sat down and we decided that we were going to tell some of the storms, the real stories. People see us in the pulpit, they see us and it looks all smiley, and Instagram looks wonderful, and wow, I wish I had that life. And they have no idea that we go through the same things they're going through, that people who are watching this program who feel challenged to the max with their family, they're going through stuff, maybe addiction has crept in, maybe one of their kids is just the burden of their heart, they feel like their soul's being ripped out, you don't know what's going to happen next, or maybe the marriage is in crisis. We've been through all of that. We've been through all of that.
And it doesn't make the smiling pictures or the nice moments any less genuine.
Right. But
there's a battle that you have to fight in order to get to that moment in time.
This is family. Yeah. This is family, you know, and the story, you know, the book started out with
chapter one, first thing, she glared at me. And
well, you know, we were a model kind of family, honestly. We had never had any, you know, kids will be kids and get into mischief, but we had never had any major issue. We had 5 kids, and it was just like a model family. We did everything together. My time, my hobby was my family, everything. And my oldest daughter went off to college. She was a model student, beautiful girl. And she went off to university, and just to make a long story short, she made choices. She started going down the wrong road, and one thing led to another. And before we knew it, we were in a major, major crisis for for our whole family, because one thing like dominoes begins to affect another. And I'll never forget it. I was preparing a message. We knew something was wrong. You know, that motherly instinct. It really is real, an intuition that says something's not right. And Sharice and I knew that something wasn't right. We couldn't put our finger on it, but the more we watched and observed, we knew that our daughter was in deep, deep trouble. The signs were all there.
You knew she needed help.
Exactly. And one Wednesday, I'll never forget it, it's that kind of mother lion. You know, that she kind of burst into my office. I was preparing to preach and was about to go out in 30 minutes, you know, for service.
Yeah, you got people in church.
Yeah, and Sharice, and that's the thing, you have to keep doing ministry while all of this is going. And to look back on it, some of the greatest sermons that I've ever preached came out of that season. It changed my ministry forever. I'll never have somebody come up to me and say, pray for my family, pray for my daughter, pray for my son, he's in trouble. And it used to be, before I went through some things with my own family, okay, I will, and I got faith for you. now I hear the cry
now you're burdened with
that I have walked through, that we've walked through, and it changes everything.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I say to people about ministry is that the most effective ministry that you'll ever do is when you're walking through that season.
So true.
You know, and whenever you're talking about something that you know, but you haven't experienced, there's a different level of understanding. When you walk through it with knowledge and experience, then it's a totally different dynamic. So when I read this title, Love Like You've Never Been Hurt Before, I thought, that's just not a clever way to say something. I could feel the expression coming through the book because, again, I have personal knowledge of you. And so to open that book up and read the transparency and then the information that you share, how did writing this book help you and your family heal? You know, because I've been with you guys recently, and everybody's together. It's a good time in the Franklin household.
It really is.
You know,
it's a story of redemption.
And sometimes when stories get told, they almost rip scabs off of old wounds. So how is it that the family was able to heal through the writing of this book?
Well, we to make a long story short, my wife felt the urgency. We've got to go get our daughter. So we jump in the car. Unplanned.
We leave service.
We leave service. I gave it to somebody else and said, I'm out of here. And because my family is more important than anything. And we go up and it's a very emotional experience. And when we saw my daughter dropped to her knees and broke. And she was in a desperate place. The enemy was telling her just to end it all. Yeah. And we immediately took her, brought her back home. I wish I could say that was the end of the story. It wasn't, as in most real crises. Yeah. Sometimes it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And some of you have been praying and, you're going through hell and, you think this is the end, this is as bad as it can get. And unfortunately, it got worse and worse. She ends up running away. We didn't know where she was. I watched my wife curled up on a couch like this for about 4 days, and we like went out of our mind. We are very close. Yeah. I mean, that's your everything.
That's who you are.
Yeah.
And you can imagine an 18-year-old, 19-year-old girl who she's beautiful and you don't even know where she is. Yeah. And to make a long story short, we get a text that on a Saturday I'm married, and this is my decision, and this is how it's going to be. And that's where this line came across my desk one day, love like you've never been hurt. Because, the next Saturday I had a wedding of one of my daughter's closest friends. And when she walked down the aisle with her father, it just ripped my heart out. Yeah. It just ripped my heart out. And then I began to realize now I've got issues because I became bitter. Yeah. I became angry. I became resentful. I'll never forget, my daughter Caroline. Mm-hmm. And so this dynamic began to take place in our household where there was arguments and fights and the siblings began to, and I'll never forget Caroline with tears coming down her face, screaming at her sister. And she said, you've torn our family to pieces. And she said, I hate you because you've changed my daddy. My daddy's not the same man. And when I heard that, I realized this isn't an issue just about her. Something's happening to me. I'm bitter. Yeah. I'm hard. I'm angry.
Yeah. You've allowed this situation to change your dynamics.
Yeah. And this line came across my desk, love like you've never been hurt. Mm-hmm. It can't be defined for sure, but many believe that it came from Satchel Paige, the first African-American pitcher in the major leagues. Huh. And he was hurled and cursed in a racist society back then, And
one of the best ball players ever.
Exactly. Yeah. And they asked him, why did you, how do you feel about those people calling you those names? And he said, you got to love like you've never been hurt. And that just began to burn in my heart. And the great news is that if love never fails. Mm-mm. Love is the answer. It's never wrong to love. And here's the thing. I was so offended. I was so offended at what she had done and how she was living.
And in all fairness, had reason to be. And a lot of people, they want to stop at the reason. They say, this is what happened and this is why. And then once they feel that they're justified in that, they don't want to move past it.
Right.
You know.
Right. And you know, the young man, Tyler, her husband, you know, I just had this in me that I just so resented him, everything in me.
He trespassed.
I'm a country boy, you know, I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I can truly say when I look at him today, I love him like I love my son and I love my family. I can truly say how God has taken my daughter and so transformed her, and sitting here today with you guys is very special because for the first time yesterday as we're filming this, she took a microphone and she took a few moments in the service and it turned the place upside down. They were on their feet in a standing ovation. She's one of the top people in our media ministry, and and to see what God has done in our family. That's why I feel so passionate about this. I don't care what you're going through. I don't care what you're facing if you're watching this program. There's hope for your family. Right. Fight for your family. Love never fails. It might take a hour, it might take a week, it might take a month, it might take a year, it might take a lifetime.
Yeah.
But if you keep loving them, I'm often asked, I'm sure you are, what do you do if your son comes and says, I'm gay? What do? We just throw them away? What do we do if your daughter comes and says, I'm messed up and I'm pregnant out of wedlock? What do? Do we just throw them away? Is that what Christians do? I'm going to tell you what you do. You put your arms around them and you say, I love you. You're mine. You're mine. I want to eat with you. I want to talk with you. I want to have a community. I don't agree with your lifestyle. We're not going to talk about things that make us fuss. You're going to know one thing. Well, if you don't know anything else about me, I love you unconditionally.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what you do. That's what you do. You know, don't take on this whole thing of being mean and angry and ugly to people. We're never given the right to be ugly to people.
Well, Jesus Christ, our example, the author and the finisher of our faith, when people were at their worst with Him, He was at His best.
That's why He's so irresistible.
Yeah. You know, unconditional. And you know, I've often told people that love is the currency of the kingdom.
Wow, that's so good.
You know, here on this earth, we value currency.
That's right.
This man has this many millions or billions of dollars in his bank account, and we consider them to be powerful because of what they possess in earthly currency. Well, I don't believe that God's kingdom is driven by the value of $1. And so,
in other words, you can't tell me your rules and how I ought to live if I don't know you love me.
Exactly.
That's so powerful. And every parent needs to hear that.
I started to look for what is the currency of the kingdom. What does God value? You know, I mean, God doesn't look at the size of your bank account or your possessions or anything that we consider valuable. What is it that He values? And when I landed on the verse that Jesus shares with the young ruler, He says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, with all of your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And I thought, there is the currency of the kingdom.
That's it.
And when you are rich in love, you are exchanging kingdom currency.
Yeah.
And if you can't love those who are closest to you, you know, how can you show love to anybody else? I think one of the greatest challenges of the body of Christ is that we've got love for people that we see in foreign nations.
So
we've got love for people that we see in need around the world. We've got love for strangers. But can you love the person sitting next to you in the pew
and here's
that
the thing.
offended you?
This is a big point, and I make it in the book, that the people you love the most can hurt you the worst.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it wouldn't hurt me if you say something about me, if I don't love you and I don't know you and I'm not close to you.
Yeah.
But if I heard today that Matt said something about me, it's different than hearing John Doe out there said something.
Yeah, a complete stranger can't wound you.
And the people who hurt you the most are the ones that you've done the most for.
Yeah.
That you and you know, it's not just about them, but what God's going to do is going to go deep in you. Yeah. And here's what I learned. If I can give you two quick things. Here's what I learned through it. Number one, that sometimes it takes the worst things done to you to bring out the best in you. That you will never really bring out the best in you. And I don't like this theology, but it's the truth. When God's going to use you greatly, He'll hurt you deeply. All of you who want God to use you, you have no idea. When you hear a Matthew Hagee, when you hear a Kendall, when you hear a John Hagee stand up and preach, people have no idea. That's the gift.
Yeah.
But they have no idea the battle, the warfare that has gone on behind the scenes. And it's out of that crushing. The second thing that was life-changing for me that came out of it is when Peter said to Jesus, how many times do I have to forgive? I love his question. Yes. He wanted the mathematics of forgiveness.
He wanted the law.
I want the formula. Yeah, because the Jews teach you have to forgive 3 times.
Yeah.
And so he doubled it and added 1. He said 7 times. So he thought, I'm being super spiritual here.
Absolutely.
And Jesus said 70 times 7. That's 490 times. So here's the point. Forgiveness is not about keeping score.
It's a habit.
It's about losing count.
Yeah.
He doesn't want you to keep score. Well, they did it again. They did it again.
Yes, so
it's
good.
Forgiveness is not about, and I probably shouldn't do this on TV, but all of us in our family, all of us in our family, it's a tiny, pitiful, puny little tattoo. But every now and then, you could. It looks like an ink pen. It's real,
folks.
It looks like an ink pen, but it has such significance to our family because there had to come those moments. I mentioned my son-in-law. It wasn't easy. I remember the first meal. You could have cut it. It wasn't a lot of conversation. You could have cut it with a knife.
You chewed hard.
It was so awkward. It was so weird. It was so tough. That's what you do, though. That's what you do. You sit down.
Push through the hard times.
You push through the hard times. You keep trying. You keep reaching. You keep loving. You keep inviting. And little by little, those walls come down because love never fails.
Absolutely. Now, Jentezen, something that you pulled out in this book that I think is an important thing for people to recognize is that when you go through offense here on this earth and it creates a division in relationship, whether it's family, friends, whatever it may be, oftentimes people will begin to harbor that offense and it affects their relationship with God.
Sure.
You know, you write in the book about loving God like you've never been hurt.
Right.
Because there are a lot of people that they begin to filter everything through the lens of that offense and they can no longer see what God's doing in their life. How do you help people through those moments whenever they've got a wrong perspective of God's love in their life?
Yeah, I think, that particular chapter on loving God like you've never been hurt is so critical. Say to someone who has lost a child, where was God? The unexplained absences of God. He could have stopped the car wreck. He could have healed the cancer. He could have turned the situation.
If He loved me, why am I going through this?
Why am I going through this?
I know probably in your situation, as you're going through a storm with your family, in the back of your mind is, God, where did I fail you?
Well, absolutely. You beat yourself up as a parent. You feel. I tell you, the area it really affected me in was in my my preaching. There were those Saturdays where we just kind of had a hell week,
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get myself together, and I'm like, I don't feel like I have a right to go to that pulpit and preach. And yet that was the very times when the people are so precious, people in your church, the classy ones, the sharp ones, the ones who are really with you, they get it. They understand you're just people going through the same stuff. And I never felt more loved than during those times. But I would walk to that pulpit and there were times when I thought, God, this is going to be pitiful.
Yeah, if you don't show up, it's going to hurt.
and it's like a grace would come. Our church was exploding and growing like crazy. But, you have to learn how to, with the things that you can't explain. God doesn't always give explanations, but He always gives promises. He may not give you an explanation as to why your child died or why you're going through why your son's still on drugs or whatever it is, but He will give you a promise. That's right. And the promise can take you to God's plan and God's purpose if you'll hold on to it. And like Job, I think Job had to learn how to love God like he had never been hurt. We make Job's wife into a bad person. I think she gets a bad deal.
I believe that the world, I have a sermon called A Long Overdue Apology to a Misunderstood Woman.
Oh, wow.
That's good. And it's all about Job's wife because when you consider what she went through.
10 children.
She went
lost 10 in one day.
She went to 10 funerals. Not only did she see the devastation of her family, she saw the devastation of her finances. The business that provided for her life disappeared. Not only did Job lose his business, she lost their business.
That's right.
She lost her social standing. She was Mrs. Job. She had a corner table at the finest restaurant, and then in a week, everybody's going, oh, that's the lady who's going through, and they all started to whisper about her. And then she loses her husband. She lost something Job never lost. You know, Job had his health taken away, but when his health was taken away and he couldn't do anything, she now lost the one place for support that she had. And you know, everybody says, well, she was terrible. And I tell people, I said, if you picture her, I said, she's probably about 4'5" with long fangs and nasty hair. I said, but she was attractive enough that this man had 10 children with her. And then in the end of the story, he had 10 more. I said, so, you know, there's a lot of difference between who we think she is and what she really was. And it's because, you know, she had so many things happen to her without a good why. You know, and I say, whenever you see Job's wife, don't point your finger at her, pray for her.
That's it.
You know.
And you know she went through those mental questions of you know, I'm hurt. I'm offended at a God that you serve, Job. I'm hurt. Why didn't he do something? Why has he allowed us to suffer like this? But Job had the key. Job had a decision. His wife said, curse God and die in a time of brokenness.
She said the wrong thing, no question.
She said it, but he made a decision. He said, now let me get this straight. I can curse God and die, or I can bless God and live. And he said, I know my Redeemer lives. I don't have an explanation, but I've got a promise. I'll come forth as pure gold. And when it's all said and done, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. I'm going to bless God and live instead of curse God and die. And somebody needs to hear that today. That when you don't have an answer, when you don't know what to do, the greatest thing you can do is put on the garment of praise. Open your mouth. That's what got me through, was worship. I would take those moments. I play piano and sing to myself a lot. And I got a little baby grand in my house, and when nobody's there, I would go in and just start singing to the Lord. And I tell you, the presence of God,
the Lord show up and fill the house.
I'd cry, I'd weep my way through, and I'd have strength for another day. And God is faithful. If I could say one thing to your audience, I would say, if you will love like you've never been hurt, God will come. He will move. He will save. He will heal. He will deliver. And there's a verse that I talk about in the Scripture. It said that when He heals you of your wounds, I believe it's in the book of Ezekiel, He said, then your nighttime will be like noonday, and your days, listen to this, will be 7 times brighter. And if somebody will hold on that's listening to this program, that's why you don't give up. That's why you don't quit. That's why you don't take your life. That's why you don't drown yourself in addictions. Hold on to God's promise, because I'm telling you, on the authority of God's Word, there are 7 days. You're going to have days that are 7 times brighter. I'm having some of those days.
Absolutely.
When my granddaughter was born, Courtney and Tyler have given us 2 grandchildren. That's 7 times brighter right there, buddy.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And we've just had a family vacation at Disney, all of our family. There were days that were 7 times brighter. Don't give up. Hold on.
Well, there's a promise in the book of Psalms that you would see your children's children blessed.
That's it.
And that's a promise of God that you're having fulfilled in your life because you've loved like you've never been hurt. You know, Kendall, as Jentezen was sharing the situation that he and his family faced, it's something that I really was touched by, because he took the time to look at it not just from what was happening around him, but what was happening within him. And, you know, I think oftentimes when people walk through seasons of pain, they don't consider how that pain changes who they are.
That's right. Yeah, they do. And it was very emotional for me to watch him, because he was tearing up talking about his daughter and the family situation and how it changed the family dynamics and what they went through, you know, together, him and Sharice, but just sharing their heart and being so real and telling us what happened, and all the stories in his book just really touched me.
It's genuine. You know, whenever somebody walks through a difficult season and you ask them, are you okay? And they look at you with that very stoic expression and they go, I'm fine. Or they tell you, you know, yes, I'm good. most of the time they're giving you their best effort, but they're not really being genuine. Whenever you see and hear Jentezen share about loving like you've never been hurt, he's genuine. It hurt.
Yeah.
It was a bad situation. As he expresses in the conversation, he says it ripped his heart out.
Yeah.
And for that to be how you feel, and then fill the void that once was where your heart was with unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness, it's a very powerful thing. So Kendall and I, as we talk about the things that make an everyday difference in your life, I want to encourage you to write down a list of the names of people that you need to show love to today.
That's right.
That you need to consider what they've done and recognize that it's your responsibility to choose to love like you've never been hurt. It'll be something that it might not be fun, it might not be easy, it might lead to some difficult places that you thought you had dealt with. But if you do, I promise you this, God's promise will become your reward, and you'll have the opportunity to receive blessings in your tomorrows like you would never imagine today. So I thank you for joining Kendall and I on this podcast. We look forward to seeing you again.
Send us your topics that you want to hear from us about, people that you want to have here on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. So leave your comments and subscribe today.